Okay, let's dive in. Cuba, joining BRICS as a partner country. That news from January 1st, 2025, right after the summit in Russia, it feels pretty significant.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major development on the global stage.
And what really stands out is how it kind of throws down the gauntlet to the U.S., right?
Mhm.
Given those, 60 plus years of sanctions?
Exactly. 60 years. It really solidified with Kennedy's full trade embargo back in 62. And the economic toll on Cuba?
Mhm.
Well, it's been immense, no question.
Right. So that's what we're digging into today. Two big things, really.
Yep.
First, how does this BRICS partnership actually, challenge those U.S. sanctions?
Yeah.
And second, how is BRICS itself, this growing bloc, kind of positioning itself as a counterweight to that whole Western-led international system, especially on sanctions?
Good questions. Let's start with the sanctions history, maybe. It wasn't just one thing.
Right. It ramped up.
Yeah, it escalated. It started small after the 59 revolution, then Eisenhower put in some measures. The Bay of Pigs happened in 61.
And then Kennedy brought down the hammer with the full embargo in 62.
Precisely. And then you had later laws like the Cuban Democracy Act in 92 and Helms-Burton in 96. That really locked things down, made it harder to undo.
And the economic damage.
Yeah.
You hear figures in the trillions, potentially. It hit their exports hard, like sugar, didn't it?
Devastatingly hard. Sugar was huge for them. It basically choked off a lot of trade, investment, everything, really.
What was the U.S. goal initially? Was it always regime change?
Initially, yeah, economic pain to force change. Later, it sort of evolved, maybe reducing Cuba's influence. But, after all this time,
Effectiveness is really debatable.
highly debatable. And you could even argue, maybe counterintuitively, that it fostered a certain resilience, a self-reliance in Cuba.
Interesting point. Plus, there's the whole inconsistency argument, isn't there? The U.S. has relations, sometimes complex ones, with nations like China or Russia.
While keeping this really tight embargo on Cuba, yeah, it's a point many observers make.
Okay, so let's flip it. Why does Cuba want this BRICS partnership now?
Well, look, they're in a really tough spot economically. The sanctions exacerbated, of course. They desperately need, well, an economic lifeline.
So it's about finding other options, alternatives to the U.S.-dominated system.
Exactly. Alternative financing, new trade partners, investment. It's survival, but it's also strategic.
And politically, what's the angle there?
Oh, definitely political, too. It's solidarity with other developing nations, finding allies. And it gives them a much bigger stage to argue against the U.S. embargo.
So they're hoping for real economic benefits, like trade deals, maybe investment from China or Russia.
Sure. China's already a big trade partner. Russia's shown interest. Plus, there's the potential access to the BRICS Bank, the New Development Bank, or NDB. That could be crucial.
And politically, it boosts their standing, makes them seem less isolated.
Absolutely. It's a symbolic win against that isolation. Plus, it diversifies their foreign relations. And let's not forget, Cuba brings things to the table, too.
Like,
There's strengths in biotech, medicine, education. These are areas where they could actually contribute within BRICS. Plus, their location is strategic.
okay, let's talk about BRICS itself then. What's their big picture aim?
Fundamentally, BRICS is about pushing for a more, let's say, democratic and multipolar world order, challenging that post-WWII dominance of Western institutions like the IMF, the World Bank.
Right, so more South-South cooperation, trying to reform global governance.
Exactly. And a big piece of that is reducing reliance on the U.S. dollar, that whole de-dollarization push you hear about.
How are they doing that? Is it just talk?
Well, they've created concrete things. The New Development Bank, the NDB we mentioned, is one. The contingent reserve arrangement, sort of a financial safety net, is another.
Alternatives to the established players.
Precisely. And they're working on things like BRICS Pay, which could potentially be an alternative to the SWIFT payment system, making them less vulnerable to financial sanctions. It's not fully there yet, but the ambition is clear.
The ambition being a multipolar world,
Yeah.
less U.S. dominance.
That seems to be the core geopolitical goal. Yes.
So how does Cuba, joining, even as a partner, feed into that and directly challenge U.S. policy?
Well, think about trade. If Cuba can increasingly trade with BRICS nations using local currencies.
It bypasses the dollar-based sanctions to some extent.
Right. An investment from BRICS members, say China or Russia, into key Cuban sectors could provide that lifeline we talked about.
And it gives Cuba a platform.
A platform within a major global bloc to really push for lifting the embargo, maybe build a wider consensus against it.
Though we should probably note, Cuba's own economic fragility might limit how quickly they can leverage all this.
That's a fair point. It won't be an overnight transformation. Their internal economic situation is still very difficult.
What about the ripple effects
Yeah.
in Latin America, for instance?
Yeah, that's interesting. Cuba joining strengthens the BRICS footprint in the region. It could potentially offer another pole of attraction for countries looking to diversify away from just relying on the West or the U.S.
Which could make the U.S., well, react, maybe even double down on sanctions.
It's possible. The U.S. reaction will be key, influenced by domestic politics too, of course. But again, you circle back to the question, is the embargo actually achieving its aims anymore, especially in this changing world?
It really highlights the limits of unilateral action, doesn't it, when you have these alternative blocs rising?
Exactly. Cuba aligning with BRICS is a symptom and maybe a driver of that larger shift towards multipolarity. It shows how tools like sanctions might become less effective when there are viable alternatives.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway seems to be Cuba's BRICS partnership isn't just symbolic. It's a direct challenge to long-standing U.S. policy and fits right into BRICS's bigger picture of reshaping the global order.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a really interesting thought, doesn't it? Thinking about this long history, the embargo, the rise of BRICS, what does this all mean for the future of economic sanctions as a foreign policy tool, especially unilateral ones?
Right. In a world that's clearly becoming more multipolar, are they losing their punch? What new approaches might countries like the U.S. need to think about?
Something for all of us to mull over, definitely.